thing that we've talked about quite a bit over the past couple of years on the channel are bands that are screaming from the underground to be noticed and taken seriously, and groups that are really right now poised to have that instantaneous appeal with a lot of fans of different genres or subgenres of heavy metal that perhaps don't get that distribution or get to the ears that really need to hear them. Caligula's Horse may be a band that falls under that category, but they may be also a little fringe line, where they are kind of, the top part of their head is above ground right now, and they are getting to the point where their nostrils maybe are poking through so they can breathe. This is a group that is based out of Australia that has a fantastic back catalog, and In Contact is hoping to just re-solidify that and make it even faster. And so if you take a listen to an album such as Bloom, you can tell where their majesty lies. They have that sort of Dream Theater style tunnel vision with their music that is not necessarily represented in Dream Theater style antics. Instead, they just approach their tunes in a very linear fashion and then let the composition really go where it wants to and sort of handle the rest. And the result is music that has just a beautiful flow to it from track to track. This album, however, aims to go in a little bit of a different direction, and it kind of gives you a little bit of a smorgasbord. There's a little bit of alternative that can be kicked in here as well, and a little bit of that prog pop perhaps seen with Steve Wilson earlier this year, but not really too much. Dream the Dead, for example, the very first cutoff of this album feels very much like it would fit in any prog lover's discography. Perhaps something that's a little bit more proggy than No Man by, the Steven Wilson side project, but something that isn't quite as tight or as heavy on the scale as a Haken. So you get this 8-minute and 9-second long opener that is able to bend and weave and deliver a terrific performance that then goes into Will's song, Let the Colors Run, which is a little bit shorter at 4:42, but still delivers a similar experience, just in a little bit more of a tightly knit package. However, the Hands Are the Hardest is definitely an early highlight, at least for me. This is one that boasts a very elaborate and very catchy opening that is able to enter into your mind simply and then stay there and stay there and stay there, encouraging frequent revisitations. And based off of that, this is why the highlight is so important. It gives you this piece right now in the first half of this disc that instantly screams remembrance. But going into Love Conquers All and Songs for No One, you start to notice some of the different ideas that this album is going to breach, as Love Conquers All really strips things down in a way, and then Songs for No One really kind of amps things back up in a large-scale fashion, 8 minutes to be exact. What is really interesting about this album is later on in it, where you get a sort of beat poetry section, and that is where things get a little bit confusing and perplexing. The one thing this album really suffers from are its frequent pauses in songs such as Love Conquers All, Capulet, and also Inertia and The Weapon of the Wall. These are things that really kind of break down the flow and give it a little bit of a damming point that can make it a little bit difficult to continue onward, especially with the latter part feeling like that slam poetry and feeling like it has a very personal message behind it, whereas with the remainder of the album, it doesn't seem like it adds up. It's one of these things that does not feel like the other, even if it does very well belong. However, the one thing that most people will speak about whenever they talk about this album will be Graves, which is the 15.5-minute sub-finale, which then goes into Atlas Revisited, which is a 5-minute true finale. So the last two tracks off this album, spanning 20 minutes, displays that prog that Caligula's Horse delivers. It displays that fine balance that they have between both melody as well as craftsmanship. This is a band that continuously knows how to brew and develop a song and really trade it off into separate sections to deliver the maximum experience. Caligula's Horse is terrific at doing this. It's the reason why Dream the Dead, at only 8 minutes, was such a terrific opener. It's the reason why this song, at nearly twice its length, really works so very well. And it's a song that just feels that massive. It has that feel to it, almost like listening to a song such as The Count of Tuscany, only not having as much empty space as you do sometimes, or that you did get within that song during the 11-13 minute mark. Instead, Graves has a very unique and organic feel to it, almost like they sowed a seed into the ground and were able to somehow, some way, through great fertilizer and adequate watering, grow their own prog rock epic, and it has the real ability to feel like one of the best within the catalog of 2017. However, whenever we examine this album as a whole, it is going to consistently and constantly be hindered by a couple of those stop blocks that you do get during this disc, the 3 in particular. It's not so much that the flow is completely stopped, but instead dammed a little bit. It's instead something that is felt to be slowing the process down. You don't necessarily feel like you are going to stop your playthrough right then and there. However, you're going to eventually think, I just need to go on. And then, once it happens a second time, you're going to think to yourself, well, is this going to happen all the time? And by the time you make it to Inertia and the Weapon of the Wall, you start to realize this feels a little bit silly. Now, that's just one man's thought, or at least just the feeling that you get, regardless to really what your position is on some of the material that is presented within these tracks. They all, by well and good, had good ideas that were behind them. However, the execution was really where the flaw existed, and based off of that, it's a real holdback for fans that maybe want to go back and revisit the entire album as a whole. Instead of going through tracks 1 through 11 on that playback, you might only be going through 7 or 8 of them. And that's a real hindrance, especially whenever songs that we weren't able to talk about, such as Fill My Heart or even the Cannon's Mouth, still have just a lot of great material and a lot of great prog for the prog fan. So where are we with this album? I feel like some of their previous work has been able to supersede this, not only by its reputation, but also by its execution. I feel like the execution was a lot more tight. They kind of kept things a little bit simple on those discs and just aimed for what makes progressive music so awe-inspiring to a lot of people, and didn't aim to maybe bleed a little bit of personality on this. That's what I feel like at times does come out. But regardless, it's still a 21 out of 30. Still a great album by a group that is still screaming to be noticed by a lot more fans. And a lot more ears do need to check out Caligula's Horse, so if your ears are not one of them as of yet, if you're a prog fan, well, what are you doing? This is a band that just by the name alone is screaming for you to indulge upon them. So do that. And once you do, let me know your thoughts about this album in the comments below. I'm CoverkillerNation, and I'll talk to you next time. Take care.